is not limited to an increase in the instantaneous rate or the annual quantity of groundwater authorized to be withdrawn, change in the place or purpose of use, or change in the location of groundwater withdrawal. So let me go through them again. It's the annual amount, the instantaneous rate, place of use, purpose of use, and the
Place of withdrawal.
place of withdrawal, well location, which is where
Right.
over here.
Right. True.
This spring,
Mhm.
winter and spring.
You're in spring.
We are not requesting the change of any one of those. Now, you might say, okay, well, but you're changing the transport permit from 17 to 27 years, so you really are changing it. And the answer is no. This groundwater district has already permitted the water for 27 years, and the groundwater district has already permitted the water for transport. State law 36-122 doesn't allow you to discriminate between transport, so it's already been permitted for 27 years. If we were coming in asking you to extend the transport permit, not to match the term of what you've already permitted on production, but to go, say, 30 years, that would be a substantial change. We're going beyond what you've already done. We're not changing any of the other permit parameters, and all we're doing is matching the permitting that you've already done for production. And again, 36-122 doesn't allow groundwater districts to discriminate against transport. We're not suggesting that you do want to discriminate against transport, but why would you have a permit hearing on extending an existing transport permit to match what you have already permitted? So I start there. I want to go back to some of the history that Gary discussed because I think it's relevant. I won't walk through all the things that Gary mentioned, but I'll go back to at least 2014, which when we were over in the other building, there was a request by us to do three things, two of which passed, one of which failed on a 5-5 typo. And that is, we came in front of you and asked that the transport permit be extended to match the production permit. You might recall, as I certainly do, that Barney opined, you've already permitted this water, there's no legal reason why you can deny it being extended for transport as well. But he said, you get to vote on this. You may remember also the comments that were made at the time. I remember Mr. Teachin in particular, but there were some others as well that were asking questions about, you guys haven't paid all your fees. There was a fee moratorium in place at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of discussion, not about whether adding 10 years to match the production permit was the right or the wrong thing to do. It was more discussion about where Blue Water was at the time in the process. As I candidly told the board at the time, we haven't paid all the fees. And there was a fee moratorium agreement that was being honored. And I will tell you that about 3 or 4 months after that September meeting, those fees were brought current. That issue is certainly off the table. That's my memory of that meeting, is that was the hot button issue. Now, from a legal standpoint, I would ask you guys, what legal basis would the district have for not matching the permit terms? I mean, or put another way, why would you have a permit hearing? I mean, what's going to be decided by a permit hearing? We're not changing any of the permit parameters. We're matching the term of what's already been granted by the district. We're not going beyond that. What would we be deciding at the permit hearing? I mean, all of it's been decided. 27 years has already been permitted. Transport to enumerated counties has already been authorized. We're not changing any of that. All we're doing is matching the two terms. The 30 and 40-year term difference is, I think, a historical accident. There was at least one interpretation of the law that you couldn't extend a transport permit beyond 30 years. Whether that was true or not back in 2004 is beside the point, but that was the thinking at the time. It's not the thinking today, and it's not even relevant to this discussion, but that's how there was the gap, the 10-year gap between the two. I want to address a couple of, I'm going to call them political objections. We'll hear from the crowd, but you got a couple of letters from, one from Representative Syrier, and then one today that came in from Lois Goldworth. And they're telling you that you shouldn't do this, and they both reference Governor Abbott vetoing the bill. And so this bill, if it would have passed, if Abbott had not vetoed it, we wouldn't be here tonight. I would have sent in a letter to Gary and said, hey Gary, will you please extend the term? Please see bill such and such. And he would already know about it. Gary's intimately involved in this process through Texas Alliance or Association of Groundwater Districts and TWCA. It was a compromise bill. Everybody supported it. And so I'm mentioning this because Senator Goldhorse sent in this letter and Representative Syrier did. So you would think that they would have to be against that bill, right? That's only logical. It would also be wrong. They all, every single one of those signatories that sent in the letter to y'all voted for the bill that would have allowed him to extend that permit just by his signature. So you might ask, well, why did that happen? Well, Representative Larson, who was carrying that bill, got crossways with Abbott, and every single one of his bills that he was carrying got vetoed. And so here we are, something that passed unanimously on the House side and the Senate side got vetoed because of a political dispute, and all the people that have sent you letters saying don't do this voted for it. So please take those letters with a grain of salt. Their votes, which are in the journal, and I could even pull it up on my iPad and read it to you, but they're recorded votes. Everybody knows what they did. They all voted for it at the time. I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Could you keep that available to pull up at request when we desire to see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I appreciate that, keeping that in reserve as an exhibit.
Okay.
Yep. Any questions for Paul at the moment? We may reserve some questions for you after the public, and then you come back and may reserve some questions then and there.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. One second. We're gonna follow the path here. If you want to sign up, then I'll take that.
I just wanted to make a comment from what.
I'll not accept it at this point. But I'll still take one of these. You fill it out. I'll just take one from Andy. Okay, thank you.
I'll fill it out.
Okay, thank you. Let's kick it off with public comment section. It's your opportunity to speak, and that's what we want to have happen. I just got Andy's, since yours is on top, obviously, being the last. If you don't mind, we'll start with you.
I guess I came up here and I've got to agree with Mr. Carroll. I do agree that these production permit and transport permit should be aligned with each other. I'll make the request that the production permit be reduced by 10 years. This is strictly about their ability, desire to extend the financial term of this contract to gain financing over a long period of time. It has nothing to do with what y'all are here for. Giving y'all's time, I'm sorry I get worked up. But anyway, after listening to him, there's absolutely no reason to extend 10 more years. All that's going to be doing is a detriment to the board, a detriment to Milam and Burleson County landowners. It's going to reduce y'all's ability to govern and monitor to conserve our groundwater resources. It's going to give them more rights. There's no reason you're not doing anything to preclude their ability right now as far as their transport permit. There's no reason to grant this Anyway, I make the formal request to reduce the production permit by 10 years. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Andy. The next that's signed up is just a stack of order. Ronnie, you're up.
Thank y'all for having us and letting us make the comments. I think I know most of the board members, y'all listened to me battle before, but for those of y'all in the audience that don't know me, I'm Ronnie Coleman. I'm a landowner just south of Milano, here about 3 miles. I've been involved with this off and on pretty much for the last 3 years. Cindy, the question you asked, I think, is a good one, substantial versus non-substantial. A 33% increase in the time is substantial. I'll guarantee you.
That's the math.
If Gary wanted a 33% raise, it would be substantial. Or if he wanted a 33% cut in pay, that would be substantial. 33% increase is substantial, guys. So that in itself should answer your question. What happens on the 33 years if we get the 30-year transportation permit to match the 40-year drawdown or the water permit? What happens if Vista Ridge is a poor steward of the water and y'all decide to cancel the permit 20 years from now? I think you need to review these, the way they're acting with their well and the way they're drawing this water down periodically. So to give them an automatic increase now doesn't seem like good business to me. 17 years in advance. Who's going to be around here 17 years from now to protect some of these other citizens that are going to be coming into the county, moving into the county, or our kids now? Chances are some of us may not be here 17 years from now. Me too. Me too, Steve. We may not be here. So we're making decisions. Y'all will be making decisions that are going to be affecting future generations and future landowners. Why do you want to do that 17 years in advance, guys? Why not do it 5 years in advance? After you've seen how these guys operate the well and how the water's really active. What happens if we lose water? Gary doesn't know this, but I already had to lower my pump in one of my wells by 60 feet because the damn I ran out of water. Supplying my cattle and horses out here. One day I went out to the farm, there was no water. So I had to call and get Brian out there and lower my pump so I could get water. I didn't come and ask for reimbursement and all that other garbage. But the aquifer's going down. Why else would my well have dried up? And my well's 700 feet deep. I'm in the creek zone. Correct? So I had to drop my pump 60 feet so I could maintain water for mine. And that's the only thing that's on that well.
It's not a feedlot.
It's not a feedlot? No.
I've seen it.
It's my barn, and you see it.
I've seen it. It's beautiful place.
It's not, that just serves my barn. So the other question begs to answer for me, again, continue to answer, why now? Andy points out a good point. It's a financial deal. We're trying to borrow money to do this. Most lending institutions won't give long-term funding at this magnitude unless they have contracts to support. Did they not have contracts to support? I don't know, but it seems to me it's an odd deal, and it's probably could be a funding issue right now. And substantial or non-substantial changes. Substantial changes, we've got to go to, in my mind, we need to go to a public hearing. The state representatives have sent you a letter. Maybe they just now came to their senses. Maybe they didn't have another historical, I forgot how you put it, the puberty or whatever it is. Maybe they finally come to their senses or their senses, or maybe they're listening to the citizens out here. And they're trying to get something done this for the public. And that's what you guys are supposed to be looking at for too. And that's why we come to visit with you. Because I know a bunch of us represent some landowners, or we talked, you know, for some of the landowners, some that don't like to get up in front and make a fool out of themselves like I do, you know. But we're trying to get it done right. We're on your side. We want to do what's right. This is a substantial change, and therefore it does require here. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'd say, Bobby, maybe I saw the look when Ronnie said that about that. Yep. That's what I want to make. Discussion later. Okay. All right, thank you, Ronnie, again. Mr. Paul Fisher. Judge Paul Fisher, that is.
Paul's
You're kind of giving yourself away with your tag there, by the way.
I set it off before I left office. First, I want to thank y'all for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I echo the gentleman on item number 4 and appreciate what you guys do. I don't know which one's worse, being a county judge or being a director on the water board. You hear from quite a few people. But just to give you a little history of where do I stand with the water, and Judge Sutherland and I, we discussed this quite a bit for agreements. We don't always agree, but anyway, so be it. But I know that we've got to share water, okay? And there's no question about that. And just a little story, real quick. I have a son that lives in Wimberley, 2 grandchildren, and when all this process started with water, my son and I were talking, and he said, "Daddy, how do I tell your grandchildren that Papa doesn't want to share any water with you, with us?" It's important. And, you know, it was cute, but then you start doing some thinking. I do have a concern when this was brought to my attention of Vista Ridge requesting this extension. I would suggest to the board, and you know, that you've lost nothing with going to a public hearing. I think it's always very important. What you said a while ago, I echo so much of letting people voice their opinion. And then it comes back to you guys to make a decision whether to do this or not. And I heard of 3 ways y'all can go with it. I think the best is the public hearing and listen to everybody what they have to say. I imagine we'll have a bigger group at that time. The one thing I do want to address of the letters from our representatives and our senator, I'm not going to argue the point whether our representatives voted for the bill. But again, it wasn't said that once it came to the governor, he vetoed, and there was no reason given a while ago of why it was vetoed. And if you take a look at it, it was vetoed because of transparency, of make sure that the public is informed. That's why it was vetoed. And I could be wrong, and Mr. Sirier's Representative Johnson, Sirier, Mr. Londa was, and if I'm wrong, then please tell me, but that was the reason it got people. And, you know, 17 years from now, again, agree with the gentleman, I'm going to be 81. I did a little math a while ago, and what I would be at that time. And 17 years from now, a lot of things can happen to us. We may not have that water down there to produce. And then again, I hope I'm wrong. We may have all the water down there that we can help everybody out. I've always said that this is a band-aid to supply water. And the state's going to have to get serious of how we're going to supply water to this whole state. But right now, just a temporary. 17 years from now, You know, why all of a sudden, and I halfway understand that you'd like to make it to the 2044, but you have this one little hole that should something go wrong and we don't have the water down there, they'll may be able to stop it. I don't see the big rush. I have gone to our water district board numerous of times, and I've always said, let's do this slow. We don't have to jump at it and give everything, and you know, and let's be careful, because every one of us in here are responsible, especially just like what I said about my grandchildren, to lay the groundwork so they have water. And moving this quick, I really have to question. But again, to sum it up, thank you, gentlemen, for listening. I just recommend go to the public hearing. It's always good to get to hear what your people have to say. Thank you.
Judge Fisher, we appreciate that comment. We appreciate your attendance tonight, as well as your friend there, representative. Thank you for your attendance as well tonight, sir.
And I want to give you an apology real quick. We're going to be leaving here in a little bit. We have our neighborhood watch, and I want to make sure they don't kill the grass on the courthouse. And the second one, they're giving away free hot dogs.
I'm trying to think of something that I could offer you that would be more beneficial to you. But in all honesty, I can see your preference. Especially the hot dogs. It is kind of late, right, Lee? But I appreciate that, Judge. Thank you for coming so far along with you, sir, as well. Thank you for attendance and that comment. Next in line would be Judith McGarry. Judith, you're up.
Thank you. First, I'd like to basically just say I agree with everything Ron said, and I think what he was saying is the best solution, which is this permit renewal's 17 years from now. Let's worry about it a little closer when we have a sense of what the impact is on the aquifer, what the reality is of these transports and things like that. But what I want to focus on is, even putting that aside, a lawyer, so I'm going to focus on the legalese, and I'm going to focus on process, your rules, and why we even have procedures. So there were some quotes from the rules, but some stuff got left out as that was being quoted. So I'd like to start with the fact that you have a specific rule, Rule 8.3, that says hearings for transport permits. And then you have Rule 8.7, where the entire rule is extension of transport permit. You have a rule that is absolutely specific to this exact situation. When an applicant, when a permittee, someone who already holds a permit, wants to extend their transport permit. And it says the permittee may apply for an extension of the term of the transport permit granted under this Section 8, and the district shall consider and grant or deny each application for extension of transport permit in the same manner as is provided herein for the application of a permit. You have a rule that's directly on point. It says they have to come in, they submit an application, then there's notice and a hearing, you go through the process. In some ways, it really doesn't matter what any of you or us think will be proven at that hearing. That's your rule, and that's what governs it. This somehow has gone back, there's been this push to call it non-substantial, which is a whole different section of the rules. Non-substantial does not appear in Section 8, which governs transport permits. It appears in Section 7. So let's say we're going to flip back and forth between them, and we're going to try to find both and figuring out how to match them. Mr. Terrell quoted some of the language from the rule on substantial, but not all. He gave you several examples about what is considered non-substantial, but didn't mention that the way the rule is phrased is it says a substantial change to a permit includes, but is not limited to. The three things he quoted are simply examples of what are substantial changes. And I put to you that one of those, as explicitly in the rule, it says a change in place or purpose of use of the groundwater. Well, they're not trying to change what they're doing up until the next 17 years, but this renewal, this 10-year extension, would change the use, place, or purpose of use after that, for those 10 years that they're seeking. I'm not trying to make that an exact case. That's, that's sort of prayer, but it certainly fits closely with the examples of what are substantial changes. And last, I point you to one of your rule on hearings, specifically section 14, where 14.1 talks about the types of hearings, and the first type is a permit hearing, and says the district will hold hearings on water well drilling permits, operating permits, transport permits, permit renewals, or amendments. Now, they're calling this an extension, but it's effectively a renewal. What else is an extension? They're trying, a renewal and an extension is let's have it for a longer time period. These are your rules. There's no good reason to avoid them, to bypass them for this. I'd like to briefly talk, I was down at the legislature for every single one of these water bill hearings. I lived down there. And the interesting thing is, so I believe Mr. Knight wrote a letter before, like in 2015, I believe it was, maybe 2016, saying, oh yeah, the transport permit would be automatically renewed along with the operating permit. I could write you a legal brief as to why I disagree with that opinion. All lawyers can argue. It was a gray area. It was not clear cut. It became clear cut by the fact that the legislature said, oops, no, that's not actually the case. The only reason House Bill 2738 had to, or 2378, pardon my dyslexia, House Bill 2378 had to be introduced was because in the legislature's opinion, transport permits were not automatically renewed, even though operating permits were. That was the discussion. And SAWS was down there testifying that that was the problem. So to try to say like, oh no, everyone understands that transport permits could just automatically be renewed, flies in the face that House Bill 2738, I don't remember if it was 2378 or 2738. The whole reason it was filed. By the way, it was not unanimous. I opposed it. And the interesting thing is if you want to get into backdoor politics and why people did things the way they did, I spoke with at least 2 organizations that were opposed to it. They didn't dare testify because they didn't want to piss off Larson. So, we can talk backdoor politics and guessing as to people's motives all we want, but what matters is that what actually happened legally. What happened legally is the governor vetoed it. The legislature made it clear that transport permits are not automatically renewed. They tried to change it, and the governor vetoed it specifically on the grounds in a written statement that he was concerned about public involvement, public participation, and transparency. So I urge you, again, I think the best solution is what Ronnie said. I don't think you need to even take this up now. Your duty as a district is to balance conservation and the orderly development of water. There isn't a good reason based on those two, either of those two, that you have to have 17 years before the permit expires. But certainly, if you decide to take Vista Ridge's individual, their business, but Vista Ridge's private business concerns into account and to try to address them, it needs to be done in accordance with your rules after notice and full hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Next up would be Ms. Michelle Damon.
Good evening, board members. Judge Fisher, thanks for attending. Save a hot dog for me, will you? My name is Michelle Gangus. I think you all know me. I'm a Lee County landowner. Judge Fisher's my judge. And I'm a director of the Simsboro Aquifer Water Defense Fund, which is a nonprofit 501c3 dedicated to protecting our Central Texas aquifers and to assisting landowners in defending their groundwater private property rights in administrative and judicial proceedings. I was here to speak to you in September 2014, and I want to just progress from my comments. I want to leave you mostly with what Judith said because I can't say anything better. But I wanted to